The knock came at 11:47 p.m., 3 sharp raps that sounded less like a request and more like a verdict. Lena Morales froze in the hallway of her small Houston townhouse, her phone glowing in her hand. She had been halfway through a text to her best friend, Jordan, complaining about the humidity and the broken air conditioner, when the sound cut through the house like a blade. Her first thought was wrong door. Her second was worse. No one knocked like that unless they wanted control. She peered through the peephole. A police officer stood on her porch, tall, broad-shouldered, posture perfect. His patrol car idled at the curb, lights off, engine humming low. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning either. His face was carefully empty, as if emotion were a uniform he'd learned to remove. Lena was 21, a part-time nursing student with a night shift starting in 6 hours. She had done nothing wrong, no loud music, no guests, no calls to the police in her life. Still, her pulse spiked. It always did when authorities showed up uninvited. She opened the door just enough to engage the chain. "Yes?" she asked. The officer's eyes flicked past her, scanning the dim interior of the house like he already owned it. "Houston Police," he said calmly. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area." "What kind of activity?" Lena asked. He paused. "Too long. Young women matching your description." That sentence landed wrong. Suspicious activity usually had verbs attached. This one had a face. "I've been home all night," Lena said. "Alone." The officer nodded, slow and deliberate, as though she'd said something predictable. "Mind if I come in and verify?" The chain rattled softly as Lena tightened her grip on the door. "I do mind. Do you have a warrant?" Something flickered across his face then, not anger, not surprise, but irritation, quickly buried. "Ma'am, I'm trying to keep you safe." "From what?" "From people who don't cooperate." The words were smooth, practiced. Threat wrapped in courtesy. Lena felt the floor tilt beneath her. "I haven't done anything." "That's what everyone says." He shifted his weight, hand resting casually near his holster, not touching it, just close enough to be noticed. Lena's throat went dry. She thought of her neighbor's doorbell camera across the street, the tiny red light that blinked when it recorded. She hoped it was blinking now. "I'm calling my lawyer," she said, though she didn't have one. The officer exhaled, almost amused. "That won't be necessary." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You girls think you know your rights. But out here, late at night, things can get misunderstood." Something in his tone made her stomach turn. This wasn't about safety. This was about power. "I'm closing the door," Lena said. She reached for the handle. The officer's hand shot out, not to stop the door, but to slip into the gap before it closed. The chain snapped tight with a metallic crack. Lena yelped, stumbling back. "That was a mistake," he said quietly. Across the street, the camera blinked. Lena's heart pounded so hard she could hear it. "Get your hand out of my door." "Step back," he ordered. "No." For the first time, his mask slipped. His eyes hardened, jaw tightening as if he were grinding down restraint. "You're obstructing an investigation. I'm in my own home." He straightened, voice suddenly loud enough to carry. "Ma'am, stop resisting." "I'm not resisting anything." The neighbors' houses remained dark. Curtains closed. The world narrowed to the porch light, the broken chain, and the officer's shadow stretching across her living room floor. Then, just as suddenly, he withdrew his hand. Lena gasped as the door swung shut. She slammed the deadbolt, her hands shaking so badly she missed it twice. She slid down against the door, breath coming in sharp, uneven bursts. Outside, the officer stood perfectly still for a moment. Then he tapped something into his radio. Lena's phone buzzed in her hand, a missed call from Jordan. She didn't answer. She couldn't speak. Through the door, she heard the officer's voice, calm and official, reporting something that made her blood run cold. "Dispatch, be advised. Female occupant acting erratic. Possible intoxication. I'll be filing a report." "A report? About her? About this?" The patrol car door opened and closed. The engine revved. Tires rolled away. Lena stayed on the floor long after the sound faded, staring at the door as if it might come alive again. Somewhere deep inside her, a certainty took root: this wasn't over. She didn't know yet that other women had heard the same knock. That other doors had opened wider. That some had never opened again. Across the street, the camera kept recording, silent and patient, holding on to the truth long after the city chose to forget it. Officer Daniel Mercer typed it from the driver's seat of his patrol car, parked beneath the shade of a live oak near downtown Houston. His fingers moved quickly, confidently, as if the words had been waiting for him all along. Female subject appeared disoriented. Refused lawful request. Behavior consistent with intoxication. He added a note about heightened agitation, then checked the box marked no further action required. He leaned back, satisfied. To anyone reading it later, and many would, Mercer sounded reasonable, professional, restrained. The kind of officer who gave people chances. The kind supervisors trusted without question. That trust had been earned carefully, over years. At 38, Daniel Mercer was everything the department liked to showcase. Clean record. Commendations for community engagement. A framed photo in the precinct lobby showed him kneeling at a neighborhood cookout, laughing with local kids, a plastic badge pinned to his uniform by a smiling teenager. Officer of the Month, twice. His smile in the photo was warm, almost gentle. No one looking at it would imagine him standing on a dark porch at midnight, blocking a young woman's door. Later that day, Mercer walked into the precinct like a man with nothing to hide. He greeted the desk sergeant by name, accepted a cup of burnt coffee without complaint, and listened patiently as a rookie officer rambled about a traffic stop gone wrong. "Relax," Mercer said, clapping the younger man on the shoulder. "You did fine. Just write it clean. Write it clean." That was his philosophy. He understood something many didn't: reports mattered more than reality. What wasn't written didn't exist. What was written, if phrased carefully, became truth. At the end of the hall, Captain Robert Hayes glanced up from his office as Mercer passed. "Daniel," he called. "Got a minute?" Mercer stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Community board meeting tonight," Hayes said. "They want you there. You're good with people." Mercer smiled modestly. "Of course, sir." As he turned to leave, Hayes added, "And good job keeping things calm out there. City's tense lately." Mercer nodded. "Calm. That was what they called it." Across town, Lena Morales sat at her kitchen table, staring at her laptop screen. She hadn't slept. Her eyes burned, her coffee untouched. The police report had been uploaded overnight, public record. She read it again, disbelief hardening into anger. Erratic. Intoxicated. None of it was true. Her hands trembled as she closed the laptop. She thought about filing a complaint. She even dialed the non-emergency number, then hung up before it rang twice. What would she say? One officer's word against hers. No bruises. No witnesses willing to speak. Just fear. Fear didn't file paperwork. She didn't know that 2 years earlier, a 22-year-old college student named Brianna Keller had filed a complaint using almost the same words Lena had rehearsed. She didn't know that Brianna's complaint had been marked unsubstantiated and quietly buried after Mercer wrote that Brianna appeared emotionally unstable. She didn't know about Maya Thompson, 24, arrested during a traffic stop Mercer described as routine. Drugs were found in her glove compartment, later discovered to have no fingerprints. Charges dropped. Apology never given. Each incident sat alone in the system, harmless looking, disconnected. Mercer knew how to keep them that way. That evening, he stood at a community center podium, speaking smoothly about safety initiatives and trust between police and citizens. He made eye contact, nodded sympathetically, laughed at the right moments. When a woman asked about concerns over excessive force, Mercer leaned forward, earnest. "We hold ourselves to the highest standards," he said. "One bad interaction doesn't define us. We're here to protect." Applause followed. In the back row, a teenage girl watched him closely. Her name was Kayla Reed. She was 19, quiet, observant, there with her aunt. Something about Mercer's voice unsettled her. Not what he said, how easily he said it. As the meeting ended, Mercer shook hands, accepted thanks, posed for photos. He noticed Kayla watching him and smiled. She looked away. Later that night, Mercer drove his patrol car slowly through residential streets, windows down, radio low. He liked nights like this, quiet, controlled. He passed the townhouse where Lena lived but didn't stop. Not yet. He didn't need to. Power, he believed, was most effective when applied sparingly. At a red light, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I saw what you did last night." Mercer's jaw tightened. He deleted it without replying. People saw things all the time. That didn't mean they understood them. And even if they did, understanding wasn't enough. Not without proof. Not without someone willing to listen. The light turned green. Mercer drove on, calm as ever, unaware, or unwilling to admit, that the careful image he'd built was beginning to crack, hairline fractures spreading beneath the surface. Somewhere, a camera file sat untouched. Somewhere, memories refused to fade. And somewhere deep inside the system that had protected him for years, a question was forming, quiet, dangerous, and impossible to erase. The first thing that unsettled Lina Morales wasn't the report, it was how familiar it felt. She sat on her bed days later, laptop balanced on her knees, scrolling through local forums she had never paid attention to before. Neighborhood watch posts. Legal aid comment threads. Stories people told when they believed no one official was listening. She searched vague phrases at first: police late-night knock, false report Houston, officer intimidation, expecting nothing. What she found made her stomach sink. Different names. Different streets. Same language. She seemed agitated. She refused to cooperate. "I feared for my safety." The phrasing repeated itself like a copied script, each sentence wearing a different face. Lina clicked deeper, heart thudding harder with every post. A 23-year-old woman stopped while walking home from work. A 19-year-old pulled over for a broken taillight. A 26-year-old questioned on her porch for suspicious behavior. All women. All alone. All late at night. And one officer's name appeared more than once. Daniel Mercer. Lina shut the laptop and pressed her palms to her eyes. She wasn't imagining it. This wasn't paranoia born of fear. There was a shape to it now, a pattern that only became visible once you stepped far enough back. At the precinct, no one stepped back. Internal Affairs received complaints the way a shoreline received waves, endlessly, impersonally. Files stacked. Numbers logged. Conclusions reached quickly. One complaint was noise. 2 were coincidence. 3 were still manageable. Mercer had more than 3, but never enough at one time. Each report existed in isolation, stripped of context. Investigators reviewed them like separate puzzles, never laying the pieces side by side. The system wasn't designed to find patterns. It was designed to close cases. Detective Alan Pierce knew this better than most. At 46, Pierce had spent over 2 decades inside the department, long enough to recognize when something felt wrong and even longer to know when nothing would be done about it. He wasn't assigned to Mercer. He wasn't supposed to be interested. But a recent fatal shooting had crossed his desk, one involving a 20-year-old woman named Talia Brooks. Shot during a confrontation. Mercer had been the responding officer. The report was clean. Too clean. Pierce sat alone in his office after hours, files spread across his desk. He reread Mercer's account, then pulled older reports from the archive. Different incidents. Same tone. Same phrasing. The same careful emphasis on the subject's behavior rather than the officer's actions. Pierce leaned back, rubbing his jaw. It wasn't proof. It was worse. It was suggestion. Across town, Kayla Reed replayed the community meeting in her head. Mercer's voice. His smile. The way he'd scanned the room before speaking, as if assessing threats that didn't exist. She told herself she was overthinking it, until she remembered the night her friend Alicia had been stopped. Alicia had been 21, driving Kayla home from a late shift. Mercer's lights flashed behind them, sudden and bright. The stop stretched into 20 minutes. Questions that made no sense. A hand resting too close to a holster. Mercer had let them go with a warning and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. At the time, they laughed it off. Now, Kayla wasn't laughing. She opened her phone and typed a message she hesitated to send. "Did anything weird happen when that officer stopped us?" The reply came minutes later. "I thought it was just me." "Why?" That night, Lina received another message from an unknown number. This one didn't accuse. It asked, "Did he come to your door too?" Lina stared at the screen, pulse racing. Slowly, she typed back, "Yes." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Reappeared. "You're not the first." They met days later at a quiet cafe, sitting far from the windows. The woman introduced herself as Brianna Keller. 24 now. Tired eyes. Steady voice. "I filed a complaint," Brianna said, stirring her coffee without drinking it. "Nothing happened. He filed one about me. That stayed." Lena listened, anger coiling tighter with every word. Brianna described the same tactics. The same calm intimidation. The same outcome. "I thought I was alone," Lena said. "So did I." Piece by piece, the shape grew clearer. At the precinct, Pierce compiled his own quiet list. Names. Dates. Locations. He didn't share it. Not yet. He knew better. Accusations without undeniable evidence were career-ending for the accuser. Mercer continued his patrols, confident, controlled. He noticed the glances now, how some people looked away too quickly, how others watched him a beat too long. He dismissed it as paranoia. People always suspected authority. What he didn't see were the threads tightening around him. A doorbell camera here. A saved text there. Memories aligning like stars after years of darkness. Individually meaningless. Together, dangerous. The pattern had been there all along, hidden by paperwork and silence. Now it was being traced, not by the system meant to protect people, but by those who had learned, too late, that protection was never guaranteed. And somewhere between reports and recollections, truth was waking up. The first arrest came quietly. No sirens. No struggle. Just a calm request delivered with professional courtesy, the kind that discouraged resistance before it began. Maya Thompson was 22 when Daniel Mercer pulled her over on a near-empty stretch of road just after midnight. She had worked a double shift at a downtown restaurant and was driving home with aching feet and a foggy mind. The flashing lights startled her more than they should have. She pulled over immediately, hands visible on the steering wheel like she'd been taught. Mercer approached slowly, his shadow stretching across her window. "Evening," he said. "You know why I stopped you?" "No, sir," Maya replied. He claimed her rear plate light was out. She didn't argue. She'd learned early that questions could sound like challenges. He asked where she was coming from, where she was going, whether she'd been drinking. His tone was polite but persistent, circling her answers like a vulture testing the air. Then came the request to step out of the car. Maya complied. She watched him open her glove compartment, his movements deliberate. When he straightened, there was something small in his hand. A plastic bag. White powder. Her breath caught. "That's not mine." Mercer looked at her with what almost passed for sympathy. "Ma'am, I was hoping you wouldn't say that." The arrest report wrote itself. Possession. Suspicion of intent. The bag vanished into evidence. Maya spent the night in a holding cell, shaking, replaying every second in her mind, trying to understand how a normal drive home had turned into a nightmare. Charges were dropped months later, quietly. No explanation. No apology. The evidence couldn't be verified. But the arrest stayed. Maya lost her job. Then her apartment. Friends stopped calling. Employers stopped replying. She learned the hard way that even false accusations left permanent stains. She wasn't the only one. In another part of Houston, 20-year-old Alina Perez was arrested for obstruction after questioning why she was being detained outside her own apartment building. Mercer's report described her as hostile and uncooperative. Body camera footage was unavailable due to a technical malfunction. Alina spent 2 days in jail before her father managed to secure her release. She never filed a complaint. She was too tired. Too scared. Silence became a survival strategy. Inside the department, Mercer's name carried weight. Supervisors trusted his judgment. Prosecutors trusted his reports. When charges fell apart, they blamed the system, not the officer. Why wouldn't they? Mercer never raised his voice in public. Never showed aggression on camera. He understood the limits, and how to work just inside them. Detective Alan Pierce watched the pattern repeat, frustration gnawing at him. He pulled Maya's file again, comparing it to others. The same phrasing. The same convenient gaps. Evidence that appeared without witnesses and disappeared without consequence. Still, it wasn't enough. Pierce approached a colleague in internal affairs, carefully, hypothetically. "You ever notice how some officers seem to attract the same kinds of complaints?" The colleague shrugged. "People lie. Cops get blamed. Pierce didn't push. He knew how walls were built. Meanwhile, Lena, Brianna, and Kayla met in secret, their small circle growing as others cautiously joined. Stories poured out, hesitant at first, then faster, heavier, like floodwaters breaking through a dam. They compared notes, dates, locations. Mercer had always been alone with them. Always after dark. Always with plausible cause. What if we go public? Kayla asked one night. Brianna shook her head. They'll tear us apart. Say we're lying. Say we want attention. Lena clenched her fists. So what do? We wait, Brianna said. And we gather everything. They saved messages. Screenshots. Old voicemails they'd been afraid to delete. One woman brought a traffic stop receipt with the time altered. Another had a blurry photo of Mercer's patrol car parked outside her building long after he'd claimed to leave. None of it was explosive on its own. Together, it was damning. Mercer sensed the shift before he understood it. Complaints didn't reach him, but whispers did. He noticed internal affairs requesting files they'd ignored before. A prosecutor asked questions he didn't like. A junior officer hesitated before backing his account of a stop. For the first time in years, Mercer felt watched. He responded the only way he knew how, tightening control. Reports became more detailed. Language more precise. He avoided cameras when possible. He chose his encounters carefully, favoring those least likely to fight back. But mistakes crept in. Power, once absolute, had a way of breeding carelessness. The women he had counted on to stay silent were no longer alone. They were talking. Comparing. Remembering. And in the background, unseen and unheard, small digital witnesses, cameras, timestamps, recordings, waited patiently, holding on to moments Mercer believed had vanished forever. The system had failed them once. It had failed them repeatedly. But something was changing. And soon, silence would no longer protect anyone. The first shooting was called a mistake. That was the word used at the press conference, mistake, spoken carefully, like a bomb meant to soothe rather than explain. Officer Daniel Mercer stood several feet behind the podium, hands clasped, eyes lowered in solemn restraint. The police chief spoke of a rapidly evolving situation and a perceived threat. Reporters scribbled. Cameras flashed. The victim's name was Natalie Owens. She was 20 years old. Natalie had been walking home from a friend's apartment just before midnight, earbuds in, hoodie pulled tight against the warm Houston night. She was 6 blocks from her own front door when Mercer stopped her, citing a report of someone, matching her description, breaking into cars. Witnesses later said Natalie looked confused, not aggressive. One neighbor recalled hearing her say, "I didn't do anything," over and over again. Mercer's report stated that Natalie made a sudden movement toward her waistband. No weapon was found. The bullet struck her chest. She died before the ambulance arrived. The city mourned briefly, loudly, and then quietly moved on. Vigils were held. Hashtags trended. An internal review cleared Mercer within weeks. The conclusion was familiar, justified use of force. Lena watched the footage on her phone, bile rising in her throat. Natalie's face stared back at her from news articles, smiling, alive, frozen in time. She could have been any of them. She was all of them. "This is how it starts," Brianna whispered. Kayla didn't respond. She was already thinking about the second girl. Her name was Talia Brooks. Talia was 22 and worked nights at a medical supply warehouse. She was driving home in the early hours of a Sunday morning when Mercer pulled her over for an alleged traffic violation. The stop lasted 12 minutes. No backup was called. What happened next came from Mercer's report. He claimed Talia became combative when asked to step out of the car. That she lunged. That he feared for his life. The dash camera footage cut out at the exact moment the door opened. The bullet entered through the driver's side window. Talia's car rolled forward slowly, bumping into a curb before stopping. She was pronounced dead at the scene. This time, something felt different. Too many similarities. Too many missing pieces. 2 young women, both unarmed, both stopped late at night, both shot by the same officer within 18 months. Detective Alan Pierce stared at the files, jaw clenched so tightly it ached. He laid the reports side by side, comparing timelines, phrasing, conclusions. The language was almost identical. The justifications rehearsed. Fear. Threat. Split-second decision. Pierce leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "No," he muttered. "This isn't coincidence." At the funerals, grief curdled into anger. Natalie's mother stood before a crowd of mourners, voice shaking but steady. "My daughter was not dangerous. She was not violent. She was coming home." Talia's younger brother refused to speak to the press. He held onto a framed photo of his sister, eyes hollow, jaw locked. Behind closed doors, conversations began to shift. Prosecutors asked harder questions. Internal Affairs reopened files they had once dismissed. Still, no charges were filed. The department closed ranks. Mercer returned to duty after a mandatory leave. He kept his head down, followed procedure to the letter. Publicly, he was a grieving officer coping with tragedy. Privately, something had changed. He was angrier now. He blamed the girls. Blamed the public. Blamed the growing scrutiny that made his movements feel constrained. He told himself he had done nothing wrong. He had followed training. He had acted in the moment. But doubt, thin and unwelcome, slipped in when he least expected it. Late one night, he parked his patrol car and sat in silence, replaying the sound of gunfire in his head. Not the echo, but the pause just before. The fraction of a second where choice still existed. He pushed the thought away. Across the city, Lena, Brianna, Kayla, and others gathered in Brianna's living room, the air heavy with grief and fury. Photos of Natalie and Talia lay on the table between them. "He's escalating," Kayla said quietly. "He thinks he's untouchable," Brianna replied. Lena swallowed hard. "He came to my door. If I'd opened it wider." She didn't finish the sentence. They understood anyway. The deaths changed everything. Fear was no longer abstract. Silence felt like complicity. Each of them carried the same thought, unspoken but sharp: if we don't stop him, there will be another. Somewhere, the truth was still fragmented, locked inside files, buried in footage, scattered across memories. But grief had a way of sharpening focus. Of stripping away hesitation. The girls who never came home had left something behind. And it was demanding to be heard. The footage was never meant to be found. It sat buried in cloud storage, mislabeled, untouched for nearly 2 years, a silent witness no one thought to question. The kind of evidence that survives not because someone protects it, but because someone forgets it exists. Until one night, when a neighbor went looking for something else. Thomas Green lived across the street from Natalie Owen's last known location. A retired electrician, meticulous by habit, he spent his evenings cataloging old files, deleting junk, organizing memories. That night, he was searching for a clip of a stolen package when he noticed a timestamp that didn't belong. 11:52 p.m. Street view, motion detected. The date made his chest tighten. He clicked. The video opened with the quiet hum of summer insects and the dim glow of a porch light spilling onto the sidewalk. Natalie appeared seconds later, walking calmly, phone in hand, earbuds dangling around her neck. She didn't look hurried. She didn't look afraid. Then the patrol car rolled into frame. Mercer stepped out, posture relaxed, movements unhurried. He spoke to Natalie out of camera range at first, his voice faint but audible. Calm. Controlled. No shouting. No urgency. Natalie stepped back into view, hands visible at her sides. "I didn't do anything," she said. The words were clear. Mercer shifted closer. His hand hovered, not near his radio, not near his taser, but near his gun. Natalie raised her palms instinctively, a universal gesture of surrender. Then came the sound. Not chaotic. Not panicked. A single gunshot. Natalie collapsed, her phone skidding across the concrete. Mercer stepped back, weapon still raised, breathing steady. He did not rush to her side. He did not call for immediate medical assistance. The video ended seconds later. Thomas sat frozen, his heart pounding so hard it drowned out the room around him. He replayed it. Again. And again. This wasn't what the report described. There was no sudden movement. No lunge. No threat. Just a girl with her hands up. Thomas didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he contacted a civil rights attorney he'd once wired a house for, sending the clip with a single line, "This doesn't look right." By the end of the day, the footage had reached Detective Alan Pierce. Pierce watched it alone in his office, door locked, blinds drawn. He didn't blink. When it ended, he sat back slowly, like someone who had just stepped off a cliff. "This changes everything," he whispered. The report was false. Not misleading, false. Pierce copied the file to an encrypted drive and logged it into evidence before anyone could stop him. For the first time, there was something undeniable. Something that didn't rely on memory or testimony. Something that didn't blink. Word spread fast, faster than Mercer could contain. Internal Affairs requested an immediate interview. Prosecutors froze active cases tied to Mercer's reports. A judge quietly authorized a review of all incidents involving him over the past 5 years. Mercer was pulled off duty by sunset. He sat in a small interview room, hands folded, face carefully neutral as the video played on a screen across from him. He watched himself shoot Natalie Owens, watched the moment unfold without the distortion of narrative or justification. When the clip ended, the room was silent. "That's not the full context," Mercer said finally. Pierce leaned forward. "Then provide it." Mercer didn't answer. Outside the department, Lena's phone exploded with messages. Brianna called first, voice shaking. "They have footage," she said. "Actual footage." Lena sank onto her couch, tears blurring her vision. Relief crashed into grief so hard it left her breathless. "She didn't do anything," Lena whispered. "We know." News broke the following morning. Previously unseen video raises questions in fatal police shooting. The city erupted. Protests formed within hours. Candles lined sidewalks. Signs bore Natalie's face, Talia's name, and a question written in bold letters, "How many more?" Mercer was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. His attorney released a statement citing incomplete evidence and trial by media. But the damage was done. The image was burned into the public's mind. Inside his home, Mercer sat alone, the walls closing in. He replayed the footage in his head, searching for angles, excuses, anything he could still control. For the first time, he realized something had slipped beyond him. He wasn't afraid of prison. He was afraid of exposure. Because if that camera existed, others might too. And somewhere, on a quiet street, in a parked car, above a front door, more silent witnesses waited, patient and unblinking, holding the rest of the truth. The lie had survived for years. The footage had ended it in seconds. The city had changed overnight. Where once Houston's streets had been quiet after midnight, now whispers filled neighborhood sidewalks and living rooms. People who had turned their heads before now leaned closer, sharing stories that had been locked away for years. Fear still lingered, but outrage burned brighter. Kayla Reed had been one of the first to speak up. After the release of Thomas Green's footage, she gathered the women who had encountered Daniel Mercer in the past, those late-night stops, false accusations, and unexplained arrests. One by one, they shared details they had buried out of fear, disbelief, or shame. "It was the way he moved," Alina Perez said, voice trembling but steady. "Like he was testing me, not protecting me. He wanted control, and he knew I couldn't fight back. I was terrified to tell anyone. I thought they'd blame me." Maya Thompson nodded. "And when I tried to, the system shut me down. Files marked unsubstantiated. Charges dropped. My life ruined anyway. I didn't think speaking up would help, and maybe that's why he kept doing it." Every account fit together like a puzzle. Each story corroborated the others, revealing a pattern so consistent it was almost surgical. Mercer had been methodical, selective, careful, but not flawless. Detective Alan Pierce quietly compiled the witness statements. He recorded phone calls, collected emails, and gathered digital correspondence. He had learned years ago that power rarely protects the guilty forever, sometimes it only delays the inevitable. The turning point came with a woman named Serena Martinez. Serena was 21 when she had been stopped by Mercer while jogging late one night. She had described him as polite, overly calm, but terrifyingly deliberate. She had refused to file a complaint at the time because she feared retaliation. Now, sitting in a small office with Pierce, Serena spoke freely. "I've kept quiet all these years because I thought no one would believe me. But after seeing the footage, I can't be silent anymore." She handed over a phone with time-stamped photos. Mercer's patrol car had been parked across the street during her run, not once, but on 3 separate nights. Each time, she had noticed him observing from the shadows, waiting. The patterns were undeniable. Pierce called Internal Affairs and pressed them to reopen every case involving Mercer with witnesses willing to testify. Resistance was immediate: bureaucratic delays, requests for justification, and subtle threats, but Pierce pushed forward. Meanwhile, the women went public. Not through the media first, not with press conferences, they chose controlled interviews with attorneys and investigators. Each story added weight to the growing case: the late-night stops, the false charges, the intimidation. Some witnesses had recordings or images, others had dates, addresses, and timestamps. Lina Morales stepped forward last. She recounted her encounter from the night of the initial knock, providing the details of how Mercer had entered her doorway, how he had filed a false report, and how the chain on her door had saved her from a physical confrontation. When their stories reached news outlets, public outrage erupted. Calls for accountability filled City Hall. Protests swelled across neighborhoods. Social media amplified every word, every account. The city refused to look away. Mercer, now suspended, attempted to maintain his composure. His carefully curated image was fracturing in real time. Interviews with attorneys grew heated. Questions about his patrols, prior complaints, and his presence near the two fatal shootings became impossible to dodge. "I've been falsely accused," he said to reporters, voice measured. "These claims are being taken out of context." But context had been stripped away long ago. Witnesses refused to stay silent. Digital evidence, timestamps, photographs, and now personal accounts painted a picture Mercer could no longer manipulate. One night, Mercer sat alone in his home, reviewing the internal reports. He knew every complaint now had corroboration. Every false narrative he had carefully constructed was unraveling. The CCTV footage of Natalie Owens, the witnesses' statements, the doorbell recordings, it was all too much. He realized the truth wasn't just in the reports. It was in the people, their memories, their courage, their refusal to be silenced. For the first time, Mercer's reputation, the very shield he had relied on for years, was powerless. Across the city, families of the victims began to connect. Natalie Owens' mother met Talia Brooks' brother. Together, they joined community leaders in demanding full transparency from the police department. The narrative shifted from isolated incidents to a systemic failure, a chain of abuse enabled by silence, fear, and unchecked authority. For Pierce, the witnesses' courage was validating, but it also revealed the depth of institutional complicity. "He's been hiding in plain sight," Pierce said to himself. "And now, we finally have the proof we need." That proof wasn't just paperwork or reports, it was people who refused to be ignored. Mercer knew it. The city knew it. And somewhere deep inside, the women he had terrorized also realized it. For the first time in years, the balance of power had shifted. The witnesses would not be silenced. And Daniel Mercer, the officer everyone once trusted, would have to face the consequences of every lie, every false report, every night spent preying on the vulnerable. The camera had captured a single moment of truth, but the people had become an unbreakable chain. And that chain would not be undone. The storm hit Houston quietly at first, in the form of whispers, messages, and social media posts. Then, suddenly, it erupted, sweeping through the city like a wildfire that could not be contained. By the time Daniel Mercer sat in the interrogation room that morning, the world outside had already decided his fate. News outlets ran continuous coverage, previously unseen footage of Natalie Owens' last moments, witness accounts from dozens of women, and detailed analysis of Mercer's falsified reports. Headlines screamed, "Pattern of abuse uncovered, officer or predator," and "Houston police under fire." Inside the precinct, the tension was palpable. Supervisors who had once praised Mercer's calm professionalism now avoided eye contact. Internal Affairs investigators worked feverishly, cross-referencing files, validating witness statements, and cataloging the years of abuse and misconduct that had gone unnoticed. Pierce was at the center of it all. He had compiled the full dossier, organizing every story, every photograph, every CCTV clip. He watched as the department, the media, and the public slowly pieced together the same horrifying conclusion: Mercer had exploited the trust placed in him, using the badge as a weapon rather than a shield. Outside, protesters lined the streets, holding candles, photographs, and signs demanding justice. Natalie Owens, Talia Brooks, Maya Thompson, and countless other names were chanted in unison. For many, this was not just a call for accountability, it was a reckoning for a system that had failed its citizens for years. Mercer remained silent in the interrogation room. His public statement, once rehearsed, felt hollow now. There were too many witnesses, too many pieces of evidence. Every lie he had constructed over 4 years was unraveling, and the world was watching. The first revelation that shocked the city came from the CCTV footage. The clip showed Natalie Owens walking toward her home, hands raised, unarmed, completely calm. The shot fired by Mercer, followed by his composed demeanor afterward, contradicted every detail in the official report. There was no sudden movement, no perceived threat, no justification, only a deliberate act that cost a young woman her life. Then came the witness accounts. Women who had been harassed, stopped, and falsely accused over the years stepped forward one by one, detailing the consistent patterns Mercer had employed. Each story corroborated the others: the timing of his patrols, the targeting of young women, the way he leveraged his authority to intimidate, control, and manipulate. The city watched, horrified, as a chilling pattern emerged, a pattern that had been hidden in plain sight for 4 years. Mercer had been allowed to operate unchecked, protected by bureaucracy, silence, and public trust. Families of the victims demanded answers. At City Hall, Natalie Owens' mother spoke before a packed audience. Her voice shook, but her words were precise, filled with grief and fury. "My daughter did not deserve this. And neither did Talia, Maya, or the others. We trusted the police to protect us. Instead, they betrayed us." Her words resonated across Houston, sparking outrage not only against Mercer but also against the system that enabled him. The fallout was immediate. Mercer was suspended indefinitely and formally charged with multiple counts, including falsifying reports, obstruction of justice, and manslaughter. Internal reviews revealed systemic failures, complaints ignored, reports dismissed, and a culture of silence that had allowed a single officer to terrorize young women without consequence. The scandal extended far beyond Mercer. Senior officials were forced to resign or face scrutiny for their roles in perpetuating the abuse. Policies were rewritten, oversight committees established, and independent investigators brought in to audit every complaint filed in the past decade. Mercer's public persona, the friendly, trusted officer, was obliterated. Friends, colleagues, and community members who had once defended him turned away, unwilling to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the predator revealed by evidence. Yet the most profound change was in the survivors. Lena Morales, Breonna Keller, Kayla Reed, and the others who had dared to speak out became symbols of resilience. They organized advocacy groups, spoke at rallies, and supported one another as they navigated the emotional aftermath of confronting a system designed to protect the abuser. The cameras, once silent witnesses, were now allies. Doorbell footage, neighborhood security recordings, and time-stamped digital evidence proved critical in exposing the truth. Technology that Mercer had assumed would be irrelevant became the instrument of his undoing. Despite the victories, there was no true closure. Natalie Owens and Talia Brooks would never come home. Families grieved privately, and communities bore the scars of betrayal. The city learned a hard lesson about power, trust, and accountability. Pierce reflected on the case late one evening, alone in his office. The evidence had been painstakingly gathered, but it was courage, the courage of the witnesses, that had made the difference. "We can fix systems," he muttered. "We can't fix lost lives. But we can prevent this from happening again." And in that, there was purpose. Mercer's trial would be long and contentious, filled with appeals, defenses, and denials. But the foundation for justice had been laid, built on years of meticulous observation, silent courage, and finally, exposure. Houston had been betrayed, but it would no longer remain silent. The women who spoke, the neighbors who recorded, the detective who persisted, all of them had turned the tide. The city mourned, but it also awakened. And Daniel Mercer, once untouchable, now faced the weight of every action, every false report, every life he had destroyed. The badge he had wielded as a weapon had been stripped of its power, and the truth, long hidden, carefully concealed, had finally won. The streets of Houston would never forget. The city had been betrayed. But justice, however delayed, had begun.